Welcome back to Courage, Dear Heart, and today I'm joined by Rachel Corby, who is a personal rewilding coach, plant whisperer, concentric leader, and sacred plant medicine mentor. So today's conversation felt like a real remembering, a soft returning to something ancient, something quiet, something that has always been here, just waiting for us to notice. Rachel is the author of 4 books, including Rewild Yourself, Becoming Nature, which is how I found her, and Rewilding and the Art of Plant Whispering. And she's been in relationship with the living world in a way that many of us have forgotten, developing two-way communication with plants since the mid-90s. Her work invites us out of the noise, out of our minds, and back into a world that is alive, responsive, and deeply relational. A world where we are not separate, but part of a wider family of beings. Rachel trusts deeply that by reconnecting with the consciousness of plants, we can begin to shift the trajectory we find ourselves on, away from harm and towards something far more harmonious, far more connected, and far more whole. Rachel holds Indigenous plant ceremonies, guides workshops where people begin to build real relationships with plant spirits, and leads personal rewilding apprenticeships, mentoring both in person and online. This conversation isn't just something to listen to, it's something to feel. I really hope you enjoy this.
Hi, Charlie. What a lovely pleasure to be here.
It's an absolute joy to have you here. And as I was just saying before we press the record button, I have been a fan of yours for a long time, probably about 5 years. Came across your work through one of your many books. And yeah, I've just loved your work ever since. So just before I sort of start with the question that I always ask everybody, I'd love for you to just tell my listeners a little bit about you, what you do, and yeah, anything you feel is relevant.
Okay, thanks, Charlie. Yeah, well, obviously my name's Rachel, and I would call myself, although I don't really like having titles or putting myself in boxes, I would call myself a personal rewilding coach, and a plant whisperer. And I think that kind of sums up everything I do. And to describe perhaps what those things are, maybe I'll just go back and describe what happened to me. I mean, I was doing a geography degree. I could even go back further than that actually, but I was doing a geography degree and I was doing the research, and I was up in a remote Scottish valley for a month on my own counting plants, and something just started to open up. I just suddenly started to realize that plants weren't just things, and that there was this kind of response that was going back and forth between us, a kind of communication. Now, it took me a long time to work out how to access that at will, and how to understand what was really coming through to me from the plants. But that was in 95, no, 94, summer of 94. And that kind of opened up everything else I did. And prior to that, which I said I could go back further, was that I had a massive existential crisis as a teenager, as many of us do. And um and I just never felt that I belonged to anyone. I thought I was adopted. I thought I'd been dropped in by aliens. I just didn't feel like I belonged. And I know the word belonging is getting a bit, people are a bit bored of it, but it's so true from my perspective. I just never really, I just didn't know what life was supposed to be about. I missed the point. And it was kind of through this work, through just being outside, and through the interactions I've subsequently had with plants, that I suddenly started to feel, oh, now I get it. So I kind of like it, I describe it as like an opening of a multiple dimensions, like a multi-dimension dimensionality of being, as opposed to the very kind of two-dimensional, one-dimensional, whatever I want to call it, the kind of consensus reality that I was raised within.
Mm. Gosh, okay, we can dig. There's a lot there. But before we go there, my podcast is called Courage, Dear Heart, and when I first found you, I was really like you mentioned your existential crisis as a teenager. I think I've had probably several of those over my lifetime, but one of those was in 2016, and I happened to come across your book probably about 2018, 2019, something like that. And I'd love to ask you, and I do believe in, synchronicity. I do believe that that book came into my life for a reason as I started to rewild myself. But I'd love to hear, like, what does the word courage mean for you?
Gosh, that's a question. Courage. I think for me, courage means um, being trusting and being able to pull on my inner resources, trusting that that's enough, because
Yeah,
that gives you the power to make that step, whatever that courageous step is. Yeah.
trust. Yeah, it's a brilliant word, isn't it? And have you felt that in your life, in your body?
Yes. Yeah, I feel it a lot because I a lot of the time do things that I would otherwise consider to be a little bit nerve-wracking, a little bit frightening, a little bit like, oh my God, why am I putting myself out here again? But it's that trust on my inner resources, but the fact that I know my inner resources are intrinsically connected with Gaia, with the earth, and that's where it really comes from. Because otherwise, oh, hello, little doggy.
Sorry, my two dogs are barking. I apologize.
Otherwise, the little me thing, that is my one of my, I can't think of what you might call it, but one of my little categories I've always been in. Little me, oh poor little me, I can't do it, I can't do it. But the courage that brings me out of that space is that deep grounding and connection with all that is actually with the living earth.
Yeah, no, I'm really curious is because you mentioned that you had this experience in 1995. Did you say 1995?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
94, I think it was 94, it was while I was doing my degree. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and what was that like for you as somebody who'd felt that you didn't actually belong to start what was it like when you realized that there was a communication? Tell me about that, what that was like for you in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, it was at the beginning, I didn't really know what was happening, and I could only liken it to actually sort of falling in love. There was just something that was happening that was bigger than me. I was up there with, magnifying glass and with a plant press, and I was counting plants, and it was very scientific, and it was very much like, or how in this 1 square meter, how many different species are there? Oh, Lord, there's one of those and one of that. It was very head
Yeah.
based, and it started to something else started to happen, and I was just distracted by the beauty of it, and it actually felt like quite a psychedelic experience. It felt like I was falling into something that was so much more. So that's how it started, and I didn't really. It took me. So that was in, I think, the summer of '94, because my degree completed in '95, and then I went off traveling. And I don't think it was until about '98 or something I actually read a book that was like, oh yeah, yeah, I did read a book. I read more than one book. But then I started traveling, I was still traveling, and I started to see, oh, other people have felt this as well, and it's a thing. And then I expanded it out from there. by actually, yeah, the help that I received from finding the right books that fell into my path and teaching me, from other people's words what their experiences were, and then I could kind of pursue it, as opposed to, oh wow, that was a weird kind of psychedelic experience up that hill. While I was alone for a month, was I perhaps going crazy? But I never ever thought I was going crazy, because it was just this pull on my heart, and I just didn't have a way to frame it at that point. So it took a few more years to fill that out. Yeah.
Yeah. So for somebody listening to this and hearing like plant whispering for the first time, how would you articulate that?
So to be fair, we're all doing it all the time. We're just not paying attention. So it's not something really deeply complex. It's something that all our ancestors once did. It's indigenous people who are still living close to the land, living in the forests of, South America perhaps, are still doing. And it's a communication, essentially. So the plant whispering bit, I called it that, and I'm sure plenty of other people have called it that as well, because it's like listening as well as receiving. So you receive it from your body. So every time you maybe eat or drink a cup of nettle tea, this is what I've been doing loads this last week. So you drink a cup of nettle tea, and you can just eat take fresh nettle from your garden, or a nettle tea bag from the health store. You put it in your cup, you drink that cup of tea, you're not paying attention. You can do it with coffee as well. A cup of coffee, everybody has one in the morning. We all have a cup of coffee. But that coffee is doing something in our body. And if you slow down and pay attention, you start to notice. And perhaps some people, they'll notice palpitations. They'll notice, oh, crikey, I've had too much coffee. There's something happening here. But your body is like an antenna, and it's like receiving messages. So it's not just when we ingest these plants, drinking a cup of coffee or a nettle tea or something, but it's as we move through the environment, as we take a walk with our dog in the morning. You're seeing, at the moment, I'm seeing a lot of primrose. So as I see those primrose, well, part of me is going, oh, yummy, because they're quite tasty. But the flowers, and the leaves actually, but they're a bit rough texture. But what I'm also receiving is this little a rise. There's a little rise in me, and then when you actually look into it, that primrose can help raise you out of a sort of like a down, a sense of kind of depression or anxiety. They can help raise you up from that and give you that little easeful sense of joy. But I get that from walking around the park and looking at them, because I'm also paying attention. So plant
Mm.
whispering is hard for me to put into a few words, because I tried to do that and I ended up with like a 250-page book on it. But it is essentially that thing that happens to all of us all the time, but we're so used to not paying attention. And yeah, when you do slow down enough to pay attention, you can really do some incredible deep meditations, deep work, deep, interesting, unfolding. What is this plant in a way offering to me? How am I receiving it? And how is that teaching me about the world?
Yeah, I love that. I primarily teach women, and I part of that teaching is on how to receive.
Mm,
So I love that you've used that you receive from the plants.
mm,
It's a sort of mutual symbiotic relationship.
absolutely. Yeah.
So in your book, which is how I found you, um, Rewild Yourself, Becoming Nature, which I loved. You talk about nature, becoming nature. You talk about that rather than being separate from it, or, in our heads separate. We don't even realize that we're connected to it. A lot of people don't. What does that mean for someone who is kind of walking about busy, doing their daily life, listening to this podcast and thinking, how would I find the time to learn even to come out of my head and listen? How would you help somebody to tune in?
Yeah, okay, great question. Because I think in that book, I actually somewhere say, even if you are in solitary confinement in a jail cell, you can you can work with nature connection, because right here, it's right here. This is us. We are of nature. We are nature. So
Hmm.
number one, you've got you don't need any fancy equipment. You've got it right here. Um, so beyond saying that, yes, it's good to have a few kind of, it's like saying, oh yeah, you can do sport, you just go outside and run, isn't it? You kind of, it's helpful to develop a little practice. And
Hmm.
so one of the easiest things, even if you can't get outside, because I always think this, it's very easy for me to talk about walking barefoot, go and stand outside barefoot with your cup of coffee in the morning. But what if you don't have a garden? Or what if you can't stand up? What if you have, no use of your legs, or your 17th floor and you can't get out? So what I would suggest is really, really simple and easy. And you can do it on your commute, maybe not if you're driving, but like if you're walking or if you're on a train or a bus, just look at the trees and the plants around you and just say thank you for the oxygen. And as you breathe in, just go, oh, wow, this really oxygen rich air that I'm receiving from these trees. This is wonderful. Thank you, because that's what gives me life. And in response, in return, I am giving you my carbon dioxide, because they absorb that, and that's what they need to grow. That's what they need for their own internal chemical processes. So it's this reciprocal relationship, and that's what really we've kind of forgotten as humans. We've kind of fallen out of our knowledge that in the mainstream, that everything is a reciprocal relationship. So this beautiful, it's so easy to do. You can be doing the washing up, looking out the window, and then just take that moment to just go, oh, thank you for this breath, and I give you back mine, and just do a few cycles of that. And that's a really, really nice starting point, because no matter where you are, where you live, what you're doing in your busy daily life, a few rounds of that starts to bring you back into something. And it's one of the first things I do on a lot of my workshops. And it's incredible how profound that really simple little activity can be. Yeah.
I completely agree. I don't know if my sound's a bit dodge, but anyway, have you heard of a medicine spot? I'm assuming you've heard of a medicine spot.
Well, like a sit spot.
Yeah, sit
Yes.
spot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I found your book and I around about that sort of time I went on a rewilding retreat, which is now where I run my own rewilding retreats in Spain. And Neil, who I worked with, he said, you've got to go and sit, and you're going to go to the same place every day, and you're going to sit in nature, and you're not going to have anything with you, and I want you to just be and start to see what happens with the birds, with the plants, etc. And when I first went, I'd come from a sort of very busy world. Um, I was like, what the fuck is he making me do? And like, I don't want to sit here, and this is really annoying me. Like, and then after a day or two, I settled in. Now I was privileged enough to have a week, doing this, and I get that. Um, but it was transformational for me. It changed everything for me, even though I'd worked outside for a long time before that. And so I really hear what you're saying. And one of the things I say to my clients is, if you haven't got a garden, even just put a plant, on the
Mm.
window, and just spend some time with that plant, because you never know what what that relationship will bring you. It's that time, isn't it? And it's that care, and it's that tenderness for self And I think that's such an important thing for people to give themselves that time, which
Yeah.
I don't think many people do.
As you just said that, it just reminded me of years and years ago. And I mean, I do a lot of kind of obviously teaching about plant
Mm.
whispering. Like I say teaching, maybe it's more guiding, just creating a space where people can explore it for themselves. And one time, it was middle of winter, and so you can't go outside. So I just took a spider plant, like everyone's got one, took a spider plant. And it was incredible because just what you said, that potted plant, that single potted plant, but there were like maybe 4 or 5 of us, and we all just sat around giving loving attention to this plant and noticing what was landing in our bodies and tracking what was happening. And as we sat there, we all just like went, the plant had literally visibly changed. It had kind of like come into itself. It had the energetics around it. It was phenomenal. It was just like didn't expect that. So it's not just like looking at that plant pot on your windowsill and kind of going, "You're beautiful, thank you very much," or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like that plant really responds. Maybe it was more visible because we were really tuning in and there was a whole group of us doing it, but it was tangible. It was amazing. Yeah.
Sounds amazing, yeah. And everyone has got a spider plant, haven't they?
Yeah. And what you were saying about the giving to the self as well, it's like I think people don't realize how, I mean, I say people, and that's a real generalization, but for a lot of people, I don't think they realize how um ill the disconnect from the rest of the natural living world is making us.
Mm.
And the really large numbers of people on anxiety, stress, depression, all of those things are not in every single case, of course, but a lot of what lays underneath that is this kind of, we're just separate. Imagine being separated at birth from, does every there's been this little monkey in a zoo in Japan who was rejected by his whole family, and he's sort of like was given a little orangutan toy to play with, and finally the rest of the monkey tribe are starting to accept him. But it's like a lot of us, we're like almost separated at birth, maybe not from our flesh and blood mum and dad family, brothers and sisters family, but the rest of our family. And imagine that you're taking away, you're putting people on this planet and all of their community, all of their multi-dimensional different species community isn't there. And we're being locked in this little room, and we think it's a nice house with lots of nice toys. But then you get an opportunity like you did, Charlie, when you went to Spain, and you sit out there amongst that wider family, and all your aunts and uncles and all their different forms are sat there with you. And it's like you come into this different kind of wholeness of being, a fullness that we're missing. So I love that that's your story, that you sat there, because I love doing that. I love that. It is a privilege to be able to do that. And isn't that crazy that it's a privilege to sit for a few days and remember who your relations are?
Yeah, that's given me truth bumps. Yes, it was a privilege. And I had a very good guide. And again, I think that was a synchronistic, relationship that got created through, you know, tragedy, really, which is always interesting. Anyway, I found your book through that pathway.
Mm.
And, it's interesting what you said about being separated. Um, I mean, this may be too big a topic, but what do you think's caused that separation?
um, I have got one word, and I think it's comfort. I think it's and it is developed over hundreds and hundreds of years, but it's this kind of striving for for comfort, for survival, initially survival, but it became comfort. So if you, I mean, I don't know whether, I have this great long animated history that goes on in my head, but like when humankind first moved essentially from having a kind of hunter-gatherer lifestyle into a more agricultural, into sort of husbandry, looking after this small bed of plants, um, then there was more of an excess. It wasn't all feast and famine. They suddenly had a bit more control over, over being able to eat the most basic need. Um, Now there are like indigenous cultures in North America, for example. There are a lot of kind of examples from them where they had food beds for a long time, and they never kind of fell into what we did here in Europe. So it's not a kind of foregone conclusion that you end up doing what we did here. But here in Europe, the more food we had, the more shelter we could build, the more stationary we became as people. And then you've got that stationary house next to the field that's growing the food. So then you start putting things in it, and more becomes required for your level of comfort. I don't want to sleep on the floor anymore because there's ants and it's cold. So I'm going to kind of use a bit of horsehair to make a bed, and then that horsehair becomes a bit scratchy, so then you go and find something else. It's kind of, I think it's all this kind of progression. um, and I think it's in pursuit of comfort, we have eventually created cages for ourselves, where a lot of people, and you didn't say this when you described your sort of rewilding adventure, but a lot of people are then scared when they go outside. So I've had people that I've just kind of said, right, we're going to sit here for 3 hours at dusk, and we're going to not do anything and not move. And you're just going to be in this place and be a part of it, observe. You're not trying to do anything, you're just being in this space. And I've had people have to go back to the main camp and get a plastic chair because they didn't like sitting on the floor, and then actually being absolutely terrified. And the minute the 3 hours was up, literally running back to camp saying, "Oh my God, that was horrific." Um, we're frightened of being outside amongst it, so we've caged ourselves. We're the caged ones, really.
Yeah. I'm just sort of reflecting on that and reflecting on, I think my experience, because I was literally on my own. Neil was like, right, you're going to stay here for a few hours and you're just going to, see what happens. And then he, he left me. I don't remember being scared. I remember being irritated, just feeling really irritated and annoyed and angry. And what am I supposed to be? It was this sort of
Mm,
entitled,
mm,
mix of entitlement and that whole thing that you mentioned earlier about like poor me, and it was all washed in. I'd love to hear more about the work that you do with people, because I know you run these workshops, you run these retreats. Tell me about them. Tell my listeners about them.
mm. Well, I mean, yeah, there's obviously a variety of what I do and what I have done over the years, but what really lays at the heart of all of them, underneath all of them, is this sort of desire to kind of remind people of this kind of awe and wonder and the multidimensionality of being, is kind of help people, because we've all got it in us, we've just kind of forgotten. So some of the retreats I run are more kind of rewilding focused, which would be, we'll do a lot of barefoot walking and foraging for plants, and to eat, and to, doing fermentation, wild fermentation, and doing like 24 hours out with just water, and just kind of being out there on your own. So there's that kind of angle of it, but also I do shorter ones which is just focusing on the plants, because the plants to me are like an access point. They're an access point that is easier perhaps than other, what we'll call it, points of nature, but other beings. um, and I think the communication is absolutely key to rewilding. I don't think you can successfully rewild without without realizing you're part of a wider conversation. You can go outside. I think that's kind of survival activities, you know, where you can skin a deer and make a shelter and start fire with flint. All of those are great survival activities, but to me, they're not rewilding unless you add in that element of um, I'm not saying that you do those without deep respect, but without that kind of understanding and knowing that you have a deeper connection with all of the beings that you're among. And the only real way to know that is once you open up the lines of communication, start paying it. It's like I said right at the beginning, start paying attention to what you're receiving, what's happening in your body. Your body is a massive indicator of all the things that are going on. And then it will express through emotions and through thoughts and through other kind of feelings. But there's this one thing that's central to it all. And yeah, I mean, communication. So I mean, that's what I offer. Is a lot of the time it's just the real basics of plant communication. Do a lot of workshops around that because you can take that with you wherever you go, because everybody's on a different starting point, aren't we? You know, we're all in a different place, but that I think is key and instrumental, just communication with plants. So yeah, I mean, I do a lot around that. And
Were
it's
you
really easy. It's really easy.
which running it or being a
Oh,
participant or
no, not
teaching?
necessarily running it, but that is as well because it's run from passion. But I
Mm.
mean, it's just so many tiny little adjustments you can make in your life to start to hear what the plants are saying. That's what is really
Ah, that bit's easy. Yeah. So once I got over my irritation, and it was interesting to sort of feel that, like, I can reflect on it now, but I was in it at the time. But once that passed, something in me softened, something in me opened, and I became open to all
Mm,
of it, the birds, the plants, the trees. And it's been easy for me ever since. You know, I can get caught up like anyone else working online, etc. But yeah, I make it a priority to go out as much as I can. And I thought that do you hold ceremonies as part of your
yes,
workshops and retreats,
yes, I
indigenous
do.
plant
Yeah,
ceremonies?
yeah. So plant ceremonies with plants that are here. I mean, this I'm not. I don't think I'm allowed to say where I'm doing them yet because they haven't been released. But various festivals, for example, that's one of the things I bring to festivals, because it's a really beautiful way. So a lot of people have been to cacao ceremonies, right? Well, we've got some amazing plants here who are just as interesting, just as wise, just as ancient, just as giving as cacao. Now, for some reason, we've latched onto cacao just like we've latched onto ayahuasca and all the other kind of big name plants. But we've got stinging nettle, we've got yarrow, we've got mugwort, we've got dandelion, we've got a lot of plants here, hawthorn, elder. The list is endless. It doesn't have to be a plant. I guess maybe the cow has given people the understanding that you can have something beautiful in a with a plant. But what I offer is, yeah, native plants, indigenous plants, and the medicine of this land, because I think that's really important. We have to connect where we stand with who we stand among, so that when you walk along the street, you're suddenly walking in a community of people, and I'm going to call them people, plant people, of walking in a community of people that you're beginning to know. So you've been to a nettle ceremony, a stinging nettle ceremony, then the next time you go out and you see the stinging nettle, you notice that they're further along in their annual cycle, and that maybe the leaves are much bigger, or that the flowers are starting to form, and you greet them as a friend, as opposed to, oh look, there's a stinging nettle, I can make soup with that, or move away, I'll get stung. But suddenly, oh wow, here you are, and you look different this time, but you have taught me, or you've gifted me with this little piece of wisdom. Because that's what comes through in the ceremonies, is little pieces of wisdom. And although I've done ceremonies for, I don't know, over 100 people actually at some of these bigger events, but um, also very small ceremonies. and what comes through is easier to find out in a smaller ceremony because everybody gets the chance to share with everybody else as opposed to going off in pairs or whatever. But there's always a theme, and that theme is that character and that spirit of that plant, but each person will have a slightly different one. Say for example, stinging nettle might impart to some people something about boundaries or borders, which is kind of like, oh yeah, you can get that afterwards. There's plants sting, they know where their boundaries are. But for other people, that might come through as some kind of, you've got to find your own, oh, you've got to find what you need inside of yourself, kind of. They'll all come through, but they'll all be connected, and there'll be these little nuggets of wisdom. And yeah, then I always do something about giving back to the plant, because we can't just be in this take, take, take mentality as well. It's really important that, and that's why I said the thing about the breath, it has to be reciprocal. It has to be something about also giving back. But one of the things that you end up giving back if you come to the ceremony, or if you do a plant ceremony with an indigenous plant, is that you're giving back your love and respect, because the next time, like I say, the next time you walk past that plant, you're like, oh wow, look at you now, and you're giving your love and respect.
Oh, I just love that, Rachel. And I love how I love just how your energy as you described that. And again, it reminds me of the retreat I was on, the sort of nature quest, which was my first deep dive, let's say, that life invited me into. But one of the things, apart from sort of sitting alone for a long time after the couple of days, was this carving. And Neil had asked me to go to a tree and ask permission to cut a branch off so that I could carve something. And again, at the time, and this is just sort of testament to where I was at that time in my life, I was like, why do we have to ask? It didn't make sense to my brain. But upon carving, this is the very thing that I carved in 2017. I keep it here for a reason. I don't know if you'll recognize what it is.
Dagger.
Yes. You can see where I was in my life at the time.
You were quite angry, right? Was that for Neil?
It wasn't it. It was grief.
Yeah.
It was the doubt, it was anyway. Um, but carving this, I mean, he was like, you could make a spoon. Anyway, um, oh gosh, I so deeply understood, and I thought, gosh, I'm so ignorant. I really realized my ignorance, and not in a shameful way, but just, wow, I have had no idea about these plants, these trees. And as like I said to you, I've been working outside for 10 years prior to that. Just so something about life kept inviting me, and I was just like with what I was doing. So thank you for sharing that so beautifully. That yeah, that reciprocal, asking permission, giving back.
Mm,
It's so beautiful, and I think it's something we take for granted. Cooking, with vegetables and things. I mean, how are you a vegetarian? Do you?
yeah, I'm a
Yeah.
vegetarian, and I love that you just mentioned cooking, because I've got some people obviously that I've been working with for a lot of time, a long amount of time. And one of them, the other day, we were on a group call, and she was saying it just struck me this evening while I was rinsing my rice before I cooked it. And she said, as I was rinsing my rice, I suddenly thought, oh, hello. Hello, you've come such a long way to feed me. Thank you so much. And she just kind of fell into this recognition of the rice in her sieve being a living being, and to kind of give that moment of just honor and gratitude for that. And I was just so touched by what she said, because yeah, we kind of scurry along, kind of, oh well, I go outside and I'll sit with a plant and I'll do that. But then when it starts to kind of creep that far into your life, you realize. And with your beautiful dagger, wooden dagger, it creeps in other ways though, doesn't it? That kind of the thing that all of it, it's all about relationship.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
all about relationship, yes, but not just taking.
No, no.
You've mentioned, and I hope I say this right, because I hadn't heard of this before, kincentrism.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Um, Firstly, I wondered if you could share what that means for you specifically, and how would our world change if more people kind of embraced that?
Yeah, great. Thanks for asking about that. So, concentrism wasn't a word I'd actually really heard until about 3 or 4 years ago, and I was invited to participate on it was like 18 months concentric leadership, and it was basically people from all around the planet gathering together to kind of work out what it actually meant. That's weird to be invited on something that you're working out what it means, but really, kin is relation, and centrism. So all our relations as central. So humans. So it's not ecocentric. It's not anthropocentric. It's not. It's like everyone in the middle. So there's no hierarchy. There's no humans at the top. There's no slugs at the bottom. It's like we're all on there and on a kind of equal footing. And so within that equal footing, it's acknowledged that each being, although we can't all express ourselves in the same way, but each being has um, a meaning to their life. They are making decisions. They have preferences and not preferences. You'll see a plant. I always come back to plants as my example, but you'll see a plant. If the light is growing in a certain way, and people could say this is just a kind of biological response, but their preference is to move that way. We just have to kind of rethink the way that we are framing everything, because every being on this planet has the same right to be here as we do. So that's what concentrism is. Um, and there are massive research things happening at the moment for kind of um, using AI modeling, which I'm really not a fan of AI, but like using AI modeling to kind of understand languages of whales, of dolphins. So there's a lot of stuff. So the whole, um, it's all adding kudos. It's all adding kudos to the fact that every being has got something going on. And then there was a book a few years ago, um, Simard, can't remember her first name. Anyway, she wrote about forests and about trees, and we all know, perhaps we all know now about the Wood Wide Web, about the kind of sharing of resources and nutrients, and between the roots and plants and trees, and there's the kind of connections that are made between them by the mycelium. So it's all of these invisible relationships. So yeah, so that's what it's about. I can't remember what you actually asked now. I'm just going off
Um,
on one.
that's all right. I just like, how do you think our world would change if we all embrace that?
I think it would change phenomenally. I think it's not so much a cerebral process. I don't think it's so much kind of thinking, oh yes, that this what I've just said is true. It's dropping into the heart, and it's dropping into the heart and knowing it. So and once we do that, I mean, first of all, we've got to get everyone to accept it cerebrally, but once we've done
Mm.
that and we can drop into the heart and know it, not just think it, you can't act without respect for other beings. Once you kind of on this real sort of level of understanding that is body wide, it's not just from your head, then you can't just use things and throw them away. You can't just dig up something. You can't mine, all of the rare earth metals that are being mined, all of the crystals and all of the everything that we're digging up out of the earth. What if they have a purpose within the earth? We all love a crystal. I love crystals. They're beautiful. Got crystal jewelry, got crystals on my windowsill, crystals on my altar. But what if they have got a purpose where they originally were? What if they're living in community and they've got something to do? And so once you start to kind of go like that, what even crystals could be conscious, or even crystals could have a purpose or an intelligence or a vibration. I mean, what is quartz? Quartz oscillators, it's all about the vibration, about having a very coherent vibration. So if they can do that in your electronics or wherever they have been placed. In the past, it was in wristwatches, wasn't it? You'd have quartz wristwatch, right? Because they're really stable oscillators. If they do that there, what are they doing in the earth? And so it really makes you reconsider, I think, every action. I think it would make us a very different way of being. Yeah, much more inclusive, much more relationship based. And there's actually a resource that I could tell you about, which is, if you look up concentric leadership, there is a book. You could probably look it up on Amazon or wherever else as well. And there's the together with all the other people, we all inputted, just through the exercises, through the talking that we did, we all kind of came together with this stuff, and then it was edited and put together by Justine Afra Huxley and her original partner in the work, who then created this massive workbook. So if anyone is interested in concentrism, I can't remember the name of it, but if you look up concentrism on a bookseller, you'll find it. And also as a website, you can get there. There's so much work, and it's very cheaply available. I think even free for if you just want to download it. So that's lots of really free resource.
I'll get the link off you later and the name, and
Yeah,
then I'll
that would
put
be
that in
great.
the
Put in
show
the show
notes.
notes.
Yeah, because
Perfect.
that sounds amazing, and I'm sure there'll be lots of people who would be interested in that. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Um, I'm afraid I'm going to have to sort of bring it to a close, which is a real shame because you've been incredibly fascinating, and it's been a real joy to listen to you. So I appreciate your time. What's the one thing that you'd like to share, if anything else, with the women who are listening today?
Mm. Oh gosh, the one thing to share, I would say, get outside, take your shoes off, stand, close your eyes, and just feel what's happening in your body. Preferably not on the pavement outside of a busy tube station. Actually, I didn't say that bit, but when you have the chance to be somewhere, even if it's a local park and you've just got a couple of minutes, no one else is around, whether it's your back garden or whether the woods at the weekend, barefoot, eyes closed, listen to the bird song, feel your breath, feel what happens in your body, feel your um, system regulating as you kind of take that pause away from the constructed man-made world, and if you can, remember in that moment, say thank you, not to me, to everything, to all your beings around
Well, I'm going to say thank you to you specifically,
you.
um, for your time and your knowledge and your wisdom and your grace. And yeah, it's been a long time coming. So I
Mm.
appreciate it very much. Thank
Oh,
you.
thank you so much, Charlie. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Courage, Dear Heart. I really appreciate it. It would be amazing if you could leave me a review and press subscribe so that others who are looking to find freedom from anxiety and habits can find their way here. You can also go to my website, iamcharliewall.com, and subscribe, sign up for my emails, and you'll also find my Facebook group, Finding Freedom from Habits and Anxiety, on Facebook. So yeah, please do connect with me, and I'll see you next week.